Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like also to acknowledge the different schools, the Access Anessa Magendra, and I'd like also to inform everybody, kindly put your institution where you affiliated. And of course, CSU University, Sir Ferdinand Agjena, good afternoon. And of course, the rest of the participants here in our Zoom, the Minsu, our Ma'am Erlinda D. Palomera, the MMSU University, the NEU or the Nueva Ecija University Science and Technology, good afternoon. The NORS University, of course, the POMI, I think this is QC University.
Wait. Dito pa kasara yan. Sino ne? Sino mangalakan namin? Dibeng.
Of course, I'd like also to acknowledge the presence of RDE KTM office. Yeah, thank you, Sir Ferdinand from Batangas State University. Of course, from West Visayas State University, Sir Salvador Bashe Jr. From Iloilo Science and Technology, La Paz Campus. And I'd like also to acknowledge the officers, the organizations headed by our OIC National President of CeSREP Incorporated, Mr. John Lawrence D. Camacho, together with the virtual conference webinar director, Mr. Ricky A. Kibinka. Also from Benguet State University, good afternoon. From, I think this is Bukso, Ma'am Ruchel Amigo, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. From Kidapawan City National High School, Ma'am Kati. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
From SKS University, Ma'am Anessa Magendra. Good afternoon. Okay, once again, good afternoon, everyone. In a matter of 2 minutes, we're going to start our webinar. And we are also live via POMI YouTube. Stay where you are. Listen to the discussion of our esteemed speaker this afternoon. Sir or Dr. Gilbert C. Magulod Jr., good afternoon, sir. like also to acknowledge the presence of Ma'am Naimbag Imalim from Division of La Union. Ma'am Nona Liza Arcitio, good afternoon. Before we formally start with our webinar, I just would like to remind everyone, first, open your camera most of the time. Always mute your microphone so that we'll not hear unnecessary noise during the proceedings. Use headphones or earphones. Find a seat or location that is comfortable and well lighted. It is advised to wear business or smart casual attire. Finish the whole national virtual conference and complete the evaluation for you to get your certificate. Always direct your concern through personal message on our page or in our email address so we can provide answer to your concern. For the flow of our webinar, we will start first with a prayer, the welcome remarks by the OIC National President, the introduction of the resource speaker, the conference proper, the question and answer session, and we will end with some announcements. Mr. John Lawrence D. Camacho, OIC National President, CeSREP Incorporated. To our speaker, Dr. Gilbert C. Magulod Jr., University Director for Technology and Knowledge Management, Cagayan State University. To our virtual conference director, Mr. Ricky A. Kibinko. Participants, good afternoon. Welcome to the Center for Scholarly Researches of Educator in the Philippines Incorporated. It is nice to see all your faces on Zoom today. And even if we are not physically together, and in spite of the current unprecedented situation that we are in, we find ways to be able to collaborate and make sure that quality instructional delivery finds its way to our students. The challenges in learning continuity that the academic community is facing in the new normal are like mountains that we are all together, hand in hand, are trying to climb and conquer. This virtual forum is very special because our esteemed guest is none other than Dr. Gilbert C. Magulod Jr., University Director for Technology and Knowledge Management, Cagayan State University. I know that we have a lot of participants from the private higher education institutions and state universities and colleges in the Zoom call today who are looking forward to the topic quantitative research, its design and implementation, and to the open forum later to seek clarification regarding certain concerns that you have. So without further ado, let us start with the webinar with a prayer. Almighty and loving Father, Creator of heaven and earth, we praise you and adore you. You are the King of Kings. We humbly ask your forgiveness for our sins. Have mercy on us, O Lord. We are gathered here today for our webinar. Send us your Holy Spirit to be our guide and give us the wisdom to understand every topic that we are going to discuss. Enlighten our minds and let your love be upon us. May this webinar bring success and growth to our team. We thank you, Father, for this precious time that you have given us. All this we pray through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, God, forever. Amen. Dear colleagues, at this juncture, let us listen to the welcome remarks by our OIC National President and CeSREP Incorporated, the very hardworking and supportive OIC National President. Let us welcome Mr. John Lawrence D. Camacho. Let's give him a virtual clap.
Thank you very much, Sir Joven. Good afternoon to each and everyone. To our colleagues in the academe, the Department of Education, state universities and colleges, and local universities and colleges, the overall director of this webinar, officers and members of Central for Scholarly Researches of Educators in the Philippines Incorporated, or CeSREP, and to our special guest, will be properly introduced later, Sir Gilbert, and our members and officers on Zoom and YouTube Live, my warm greetings to each and everyone. It is my great honor to have you all this afternoon, despite of our busy schedule. We always give priority to our activity. This activity gives us the opportunity to learn more, to explore more, and to gain knowledge in the 21st century skills. In today's webinar, entitled Quantitative Research, its Design and Implementation, my dear colleagues, this is very important in today's trend in education. As we all know, that research plays an important role in discovering new treatments, new ideas and trends that we need to know to fill the gaps in the body of knowledge, and eventually use this to help grow and improve the skills and knowledge of our learners. It is my great purpose that this activity will provide us the opportunity to expand our knowledge and skills that educators would like to have. May this activity will provide us opportunities to explore, gain more, and extend our knowledge to our students. In behalf of CeSREP, or Center for Scholarly Research of Educators in the Philippines Incorporated, my warm welcome to each and everyone. May this activity will provide us a great knowledge for us to have this activity for our future. Good afternoon, and once again, mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you very much, Sir Camacho, for that very inspiring and electrifying message you've shared this afternoon. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have some concerns or queries about the topic, you may access the chat box, which is below the video if you are using a smartphone. If you are using a laptop, the chat icon is on the upper right-hand corner. Type your name in the chat box so you will be acknowledged. We will be having the open forum or the question and answer portion after the speaker's presentation. For our listeners here in Zoom, you may use the chat functions or the comment section to share your thoughts or questions in writing. I will be notifying you ahead if you are recognized. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is with pleasure that I introduce to all of you our esteemed resource speaker. Presently, the University Director for Knowledge and Technology Management, or KTM, of Cagayan State University, Tuguegarao City since 2018. Concurrently, serving as the Campus Research Coordinator of Cagayan State University at Lasam. He is an Associate Professor 3. He obtained his PhD in Educational Management at the age of 23 and 2013. Master of Arts in Education, major in Educational Management in 2011. Bachelor in Elementary Education, Generalist in 2010, and finished academic subjects for Bachelor Secondary Education, major in English in 2013. He has published numerous research articles, Index and Scopus, Clarivet, Analytics, and ASEAN Citation Index journals. He has an H index of 7 and an I-10 index of 5. He has presented researches in various international, national, and regional research conferences and symposia and awarded Best Research Presenter and Best Research Paper awardee. He was also awarded as Distinguished Faculty Researcher, specifically in Social Science category of Cagayan State University and 2021 Global Educators Award in Research Rank 1 in International category. He presently serves as editor and reviewer of various SSCI, Web of Science, Index, and Scopus journals, such as International Journal of Learning, Teaching, and Educational Research, Sage Open, Journal of Technology in Science Education, Studies of Applied Economics, Eurasian Journal of Educational Research, Journal of Social Studies Education Research, Asia Pacific Journal of Multidisciplinary Research. He is also a co-author of 5 books, namely Research Methodology, Quantitative and Qualitative, a practical guide for researchers from gaps in identifications to publication, How to Conduct Action Research in Education, The Teacher and Community, School, Culture, and Organizational Leadership, How to Write and Publish Your Thesis, How to Write and Publish Your Dissertation, Writing Methodological Review. He is also presently engaged in externally and institutionally funded research projects of the Cagayan State University in collaboration with the government agencies, such as the Department of Science and Technology and the Department of Agriculture. He has been endorsed and finished the Leadership Development Program for higher education institutions in the Philippines, initiated by the Southeast Asian Regional Center for Graduate Study and Research in Agriculture and the Head Foundation of Singapore from April to June 2021. He is an associate member of the National Research Council of the Philippines under Division 1, Governmental, Educational, and International Policies, and conferred as a Fellow of the Royal Institute of Educators, Singapore. Ladies and gentlemen, please all welcome our esteemed resource speaker this afternoon, Dr. Gilbert C. Magulod Jr. Let's give him a virtual clap.
Thank you very much, Sir Joven. Magandang gabi at hapon sa ating lahat. To our participants coming from the Department of Education, SUCS, LUCS, LUCs, and of course private institutions, magandang gabi po sa ating lahat. My presentation is on the quantitative researches, on its implementation, its design and its implementation. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Center for Scholarly Researches of Educators in the Philippines Incorporated for inviting me in this gathering of minds and hearts. And the topic that was given to me is not new to you. It's actually a common topic, but I'm expecting that I can provide something that could eventually allow you embrace the beauty of quantitative research. For most graduate schools and for most researchers in the universities or teachers or action researchers or those teachers in the field, there is an issue about the use of this quantitative research, which is the best or which among these research designs we have is the best. But generally, when we talk of this design, quantitative research, I think this should be the thing that a researcher must master first before going to other aspects of research designs. I'd like to present to you the local trends in statistics and research. Kasi kung pinag-uusapan po natin ay quantitative, it's just two sides of a coin. When you talk of quantitative research, we cannot remove the concept, the idea of statistics. Statistics and quantitative research, they go together. And no one can become an expert of a quantitative research if we do not know the statistics of our researches. That's why the time that the topic was given to me, was assigned to me, I reflected. And sige, subukan ko, and I hope that I can try something and I can give you something to ponder upon. Let me begin with the local trends in the statistics and the talk of quantitative research. There are issues in sampling. How do we select participants for a particular research? That is becoming an issue in quantitative research. Second, there are issues also in measurement and the way we look at the scales of researches. And another context here is what is new when we talk of quantitative research. I would like to inform you, listening participants, that I am not an statistician, but whenever you are a researcher, you should know and you must know your statistics. So perhaps the thing that I can share to you this afternoon is actually something that I can offer you from my experiences as a researcher in the university, who started as a budding researcher and eventually became a well-seasoned researcher. And pinagdaanan po natin lahat ng mga proseso ng mga ito. Kaya I could still remember that my first research is purely quantitative. Another context here is the statistical modeling. Kasi when you talk of quantitative research, ano na ba yung nababago? Ano na ba yung napapanahon? At bakit, no? Karamihan sa mga quantitative researches natin ay hindi sila napapublish. Somewhat they are not given the actual quality that this quantitative research deserves to have. Second, on the way how we teach research and statistics, it became also an issue because whenever you ask somebody, you talk about research, ang laging sasabi, mahirap yan kasi may statistics. Mahirap yan kasi kailangan mo ng mga other areas or other fields so that you can come up with a good research. And I must tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that research is actually the conglomeration of the skills you have. You must not only be good in English, you must not be good in math, but you must also be good in writing, as well as in looking for other emerging issues that are actually affecting the problem of inquiry you would like to explore. And of course, on the thesis, dissertations, and research publications, I should tell you that most of the researches that we actually look upon is their quality based on their statistical computation, kung ito ay quantitative research. So some are things that we need to consider at this moment, and these are actually the local trends. Of course, the statistics and research skills, because it can be a concern now that we really accept that there is a dearth of a statistician in our country. And this dearth of a statistician is that sometimes it follows that there's a mismatch also in the academe and industries. That there are issues that PhD level ka, somewhat ang naging statistics natin doon ay yung mga basic statistics pa lang. So I hope that this can also be addressed by way of leveling up our capacities as researchers so that we could come up with a quality quantitative research output. And of course, there are also global trends in statistics and quantitative research, which I will be presenting to you after presenting the designs and implementations in doing quantitative research. Medyo namamaos po ako, pasensya na. Okay, so let me begin with this. Wendy Newman said that stories give life to data, and data gives authority to stories. In our contextualization, we always say, kung tinatawag natin na quantitative research, ang kwenta mo dapat ay may kwento. At ang kwenta mo ay may kabuluhan. And that's actually the meaning, the reason behind the purpose of using quantitative research. Let me begin with this. Why quantitative research design? Definitely, if we have quantitative research, they produce objective data that can be clearly communicated through statistics and numbers. It's just a trivia that the woman who calculated, the first woman mathematician who calculated, or the reason behind why our astronauts were able to reach the moon is a woman mathematician. And we can say that when you talk of mathematics, statistics, they are purely quantitative. And by way of giving a quantitative data through statistics and numbers, data are objective. That's why when we teach mathematics, 1 plus 1, 2 plus 2, we always give an exact number or figure. We have what we call the 1:1 correspondence. So it says that through quantitative research, data are objective. Second, through quantitative research, we find patterns and averages, and that is the basis why we make predictions and forecasting. On May 9, that will be the election day, and surveys on the popularities of candidates, because there are independent bodies who are doing surveys, are actually coming up with the predictions who will win. And that could also provide an appreciation on your part that quantitative research is important in our socio-political life. Of course, quantitative research, whether it will be correlational, causal, you are testing soon the relationships. And through quantitative research, we will be able to generalize results to wider population. But mind you that when it's a quantitative research, there's a science behind the way how we select the actual respondents of the study. And of course, quantitative research is somewhat somewhat that easier than doing a mixed method or qualitative research because it's more on attractive to many researchers, and your speed and your efficiency to get data from respondents is faster. While compared to other research designs such as qualitative or quantitative mixed methods research are actually taxing or somewhat that laborious in its nature or in its design. Okay, of course, quantitative approaches are most commonly used for explanatory, and quantitative research is a way for us to look at the causal relationships, associations, and correlations. So for quantitative research design, there's already an impression that many researchers in our institutions are encouraged to try other research design other than quantitative. But on my part, as a researcher, one must be able to master the basics of quantitative research before you can go to other areas. You can go to other research designs, particularly mixed methods. So for quantitative research, it reminds us that the implementation is somewhat easier, but the thing there is we should be really guided with the science of research or research data gathering. Moving on. So as you can see, if we have a data, they can be categorized into quali or quanti. And our focus this afternoon is on the quantitative data, wherein they can be categorical, they can be numerical, nominal, ordinal, discrete, or continuous. But what gives us inspiration to do quantitative research is the better appreciation of objectivity of the research findings or the data we have. Moving on. So why do we do quantitative research? I should tell you that when we select a topic for quantitative research, they are what we call replication studies. Bakit sinasabi na mas madaling gawin ang quantitative research? Because there are already developed tools that can be adopted by the researcher. There are already other studies conducted, measured quantitatively, that can be adopted by other researchers. Replication studies involve the purposeful repetition of previous research to corroborate or to disconfirm the previous results. What is beautiful with quantitative research is that when we have a research that is quantitative in its nature, you can always do the replication of that research, provided you have the actual instrument, provided you can have the actual access to the respondents. That's why it's replication, because it strengthens how our knowledge about the existing body of knowledge can be confirmed or disconfirmed. I'd like to share a story that there was this scientist who conducted a certain laboratory study. So when we talk of laboratory study, particularly in sciences, it entails the use of quantitative research, like measuring the chemicals, measuring the other chemicals or other aspects of that kind of research. Then you can always repeat the findings, you can always repeat the method of that research, and you can confirm or disconfirm the results, particularly those doing sciences, those doing natural or doing hard sciences in quantitative research. And you know, a certain scientist was able to fabricate a finding of his research, and other scientists around the world repeated the method, and the finding is different from his findings. Again, they repeat it, okay? And again, it's a different finding, and until they found out that that researcher fabricated the data. So this is the beauty of quantitative research. You can always detect, you can always identify correctly, no, which is the loophole, or which is to be confirmed or disconfirmed in a particular research study. There are two types of replication research. First is a direct, and the second one is conceptual. The direct replication is that the same methods are used in order to collaborate or disconfirm a previous finding. For example, a certain researcher assess the attitude of the students using quantitative design, assess the level of teaching effectiveness of teachers. And another researcher used the same tool, used the same respondents, and if the findings are the same, with this repetition of studies or replication of studies, then you can confirm that the finding is valid or reliable. The other thing is the conceptual replication, wherein there are different methods being used to study the hypothesis or theories. And there are high rates of unsuccessful replications, by way of the meaning, research that confirms previous findings. So for example, because in quantitative research, we always look at the statement of the problem or a statement of the problem. Is there a significant difference? Is there a significant relationship? These are the emerging statement of the problems in our research. So in conceptual replication, you can always test the hypothesis. whether there is a significant difference on the attitude of students who are male or female with regards to learning a language subject or a mathematics subject. So it depends upon the hypothesis of your study. So this is the beauty now of the quantitative research. It can always be replicated through direct or conceptual replication. And you know, for quantitative research, you can always get a very conclusive evidence when 5 scientists or 5 researchers replicated your research with the same tool, the same instrument, the same respondents, and the same results will yield. That's the beauty of quantitative research for decision making. So, hindi po natin minamaliit ang kapasidad ng quantitative research because in our policy making bodies alone, quantitative data are very relevant for a policy to be adopted, to be enacted, or to be implemented. Okay? So that's actually a concern. Now, what are the considerations in replicating studies? Why I am talking about replicating studies here is that we must be able to understand that if our research is quantitative, it has the attribute to be replicated. It has the attribute to be replicated. The availability of the information needed to replicate, for example, the research protocols in your research, the instruments used, and the data sets, and in a field where research can impact public policy, such as education sciences, select a study whose replicated findings could be used to advance the policy changes. When you go back to the history of our educational development, the implementation of K-12 program, is a product of many researches, quantitative researches. And with that, we were able to adapt the findings, by the policy-making bodies, the regulatory bodies of the government, and that becomes a policy being adopted, and it advances our policy changes. And of course, for quantitative research is that the original findings in your field would always be the original study being cited. So for a quantitative research design, let's put in our minds that it should always be replicated. Yan po kasi ang pagkakaiba sa ibang research designs. That's why you can always confirm or disconfirm the findings of your research. Even just doing a simple survey of the consumer behavior, environmental literacy, environmental awareness, teaching efficacy, perceptions on the areas of leadership and management, principal management, principal leadership, provided that your research is quantitative, they can always be replicated. That's why if you look at the areas, for quantitative research, the more similar findings you have with other researches, the higher the credibility of your research outputs. What are the opportunities for quantitative researches? Okay, I'd like to share you something that in my experience as a reviewer, research paper reviewer, article reviewer of Scopus and Thomson Reuters, perhaps kasi may mga kasama rin kami kasi na medyo bias rin ang pagtingin niya sa mga data, that iba yung attitude niya towards quantitative research, iba rin yung attitude niya kung yung isang research article ay ginamitan ng mixed method. But on my part as a reviewer, I have always the appreciation of quantitative research, provided you can have the implications, the managerial, the theoretical, and the policy implications of your quantitative research. So what are the opportunities for quantitative researches? Many funding agencies require evidence-based research. such as the Department of Agriculture, the OST, anong mga government funding agencies, PSHERD, na kailangan nilang tignan yung mga perceptions, attitudes, yung kailangan nilang tignan actually in objective manner and evidence-based research what is happening in the field or what are the implications of their policies. So for quantitative researches, it's your beauty as a it's your appreciation as a quantitative research to submit research proposals for funding, particularly when profiling farmers, doing a baseline data of agriculture and fisheries in your area, in your region, in your province. They still need to be quantitative there. Quantitative data is needed. Other opportunities is that through a quantitative research, a social value of a research project is identified. Okay? So social impact, social policy, kung mga teachers naman tayo, nakikita natin how many are the possible adapters or recipients of our research findings. Quantitative research results can be used to impact policy, and that's actually the beauty behind that. Impact policy as assessing the level of participation of parents, level of participation of parents in the reading program of the school gardening. They all require quantitative data. And if the study replicates previous research, this time using a sample representative of an under-researched population, or if the rationale for the study is linked to a current event, a social problem or policy issues, and the timeliness of that proposed research can have the opportunity to be funded. The last 2 years, the time that the COVID-19 reached our Philippine shore, our DOH as an agency is funding researches of faculty members, researches of focusing on the number or the data analytics of COVID cases. Still, quantitative research is needed. Next, what are the theoretical perspectives of quantitative research? The philosophy of positivism is that for quantitative research, the research process can be measured by way of objective application of the scientific method. Laws that govern the social world can therefore be tested and proven. And it is always what we tell, to see is to believe. Yun kasi ang filosofiya ng quantitative research. To see is to believe. Maniniwala ka lang na tatlo sila kung nabibilang mo na tatlo sila. Kaya napaka-objective siya. No? Maniniwala ka lang na ang mga babae ay mas mataas ang kalang inclination towards communication skill kung nakikita mo na sa mga babae na yan, it manifests such kind of behavior and you can count. Okay? So the post-positivism is that objective reality is the research process for quantitative research. Objective reality is that the objective methods are grounded through measurement. You can measure, you can count, somewhat that is being controlled, and there is a systematic observation. Like a certain organism, if you are doing a science-based research that is laboratory-based, you can always count the attributes, no, the efficacy or effectiveness of a certain drug by way of measuring the effect of these drugs to mice, to rats. Kasi kinikilo mo yon. Kung clinical yung research mo, napaka-quantitative pa rin niya. No? Kinikilo natin, o titignan natin kung ilan yung carcinogen, ilan yung calories na nai-intake. These are science-based. It's always being measured, controlled, and a systematic observation are employed. And for quantitative research, we do not forget what we call the probability testing. and building evidence to reject or support hypotheses, but not to conclusively prove them, just according to Crotty and his associates. Further, although researcher objectivity and neutrality remain central to this philosophy, it acknowledges that researchers are knowing subjects who employ heuristic devices to guide research. For example, if you are conducting a psychological study about the eating disorders and self-esteem of teachers, students, you would always base your research around a particular theory and on this topic from the field of psychology. That's why for a quantitative research, you can have a measurement of the attitude, you can have the measurement of the attributes of the respondents, that attributes that can be counted, that can be measured. So that's the beauty of quantitative research. It's more on that positivism. Something that you see is something that you believe. Hindi ako naniniwala na mananalo si President X kung hindi ko nakikita na ganito karami ang suporta niya. So, you know, with this independent bodies who are doing surveys on the popularity of these people, of these political candidates we have, as long as they are capable to identify the actual samples of that population, then the results of their survey is eventually becoming a reality. I could still remember yung isang independent na body surveying on the popularity of the politician, hindi pa siya pumapalya ng kanyang prediction kung sino ang mananalong presidente. Okay? Kasi they were able to base the selection of the samples of the respondents scientifically. And that's the beauty of doing a quantitative research. A beauty of forecasting, a beauty of prediction. Now, what are the research questions and possible hypotheses for quantitative research? For quantitative research, questions are always deductive. When you talk of deductive, as you can see, questions center how the variables under investigation related to each other, how they affect the different groups, how they might be defined. And they may employ directional language, including words such as cause, effect, determine, influence, associate, and correlate. Kung ang mga words na ito ay meron sa statement of the problem ninyo, your research is quantitative. That's why you always tell that in the statement of the problem, is there a significant relationship between the stress management skill of the teacher and their level of stress? Is there a significant relationship between the perception of these respondents to this particular issue? So a way to measure, a way to tell that research is quantitative, or somewhat determine the effect of a certain intervention in teaching English language. Or, for example, your research is the implementation of movie poster making activity to the literary appreciation skills of the students is actually quantitative, because you are looking at the cause, the effect, and how these variables are related or correlated. And take note that in a quantitative research, you must always have your hypothesis. You must always have your hypothesis. What is this hypothesis? Your hypothesis is your prediction about how the variables relate to each other, and whether you are conducting an experimental research or survey research, you will need to provide an operational definition for each of the variables under investigation. Ngayon, kung quantitative research at ang gusto mong gamitin na design mo ay quantitative based on experimental, then you should always be guided with the quantitative data. You get the pre-test scores, you implement an intervention, then you get the post-test scores. That depends on what kind of experimental research design you will adopt. Still, it's a quantitative research. On the other way around, when you profile farmers in your area, you profile the parents in your schools and doing a survey, and you get parts of their profile variables like family income, like livelihood, like other areas that are being counted, no? Still quantitative pa rin sila. And more so, if you would like to correlate other variables with each other, provided that tama yung ginamit mong process or uri ng data mo, then you can always correlate it. Okay? So, to sum with this, in your research question for quantitative research, you should always have your hypothesis. Okay? Next. Another thing for you to do a quantitative research is that you need also to look at the literature review. We have a book on this, doing a methodological review on quantitative research. For a researcher like you, and you think that gusto mong i-adapt ang quantitative research like experimental research design, ang gusto mong gamitin sa research mo, you should always have your review of related literature. We call it as methodological review. Paano lang yung mag-download ka ng 10 researches na gumamit siya ng ganitong research design, then you also review how the method was executed. With that alone, it gives you an idea how to implement, how to conduct a certain quantitative research design. Now, the literature review provides a synthesis of your research, and kung ang gusto nyong i-research ay psychological in its nature, educational in its nature, you must be able to have the landmark studies in your topic. A requirement for every researcher to have cited researches in the paper relating to the topic. For example, one is interested to do the extent of bullying, extent and effect of bullying in your school, or online bullying in your school if online bullying is rampant, okay, or proliferating in your area, then you can come up with that extent and effect. The nature alone is quantitative. And with that, you go to Google Scholar, identify what is new, what are the new topics, what are the new findings about bullying now, no? Then you synthesize them. Or other thing is, you do what we call a literature review matrix, wherein it will provide you gaps, it will provide you the gap of your research. And what is that gap? Your research will not be published unless you can define the research gap. And should you wish to publish your research in an international referee journal that are quality journals, they will not accept your research, whether it's quanti, quali, or mixed method, if you cannot define the research gap. And the research gap in a research is being found in the synthesis of your literature. Okay? So in the synthesis of your literature, because the research gap provides you two things. What is new in bullying and what is not new in bullying. And as a researcher, when somebody will ask you and you are doing a certain kind of study relating to bullying, if you do not have a review article in your research, meaning to say you did not read something. One cannot afford to do a research if one is innocent about the topic. Okay? So, though quantitative yan, qualitative or mixed design, Lahat dapat, kung gusto nating explore ang topic na yan, nakapagbasa na tayo, alam na natin kung ano yung napapanahon na method na gamitin dyan, alam na natin kung ano yung pinakabagong instrument to measure that kind of attributes, because we were able to provide a good literature review. And of course, to do so, seek previous quantitative research studies about each variable and those studies that examine the relationship between and among the variables in your study. Lalong-lalo na, ang mga teachers kasi, kung hindi experimental ang ginagawa na research, research yan sa management, research yan sa leadership, research yan sa efficacy, research yan sa attitude ng mga teachers or ng mga parents. So, should you wish to do a research on the teaching efficacy in the post-pandemic era, sorry, you must be able to download the latest studies about teaching efficacy in the online or in the virtual learning environment. Ang dami-dami. Punta ka lang sa Google Scholar, i-type mo teaching efficacy, lahat na yan lalabas. Or, if you have access to the Elsevier database being given by the Department of Science and Technology through the NRCP, the better the instruments you can get. Because that Elsevier database, Scopus database na binibigay nila is the higher the quality of research articles you can get. Or pwede naman sa Google Scholar ka kukuha ng literature review mo, as long as alam mong i-track kung yung research na pinagkuhanan mo ay credible or reputable. Kasi karamihan kasi sa mga journals, marami tayong tinatawag na mga predatory journals. What are these predatory journals? Yung mga journals na nag-accept ng mga articles, basta magbayad ka, they publish it. But there's no strict review. There's no quality on the paper. So if you wish to get good references, you go to EBSCOHOS, you go to Scopus database database wherein you can get references that are quality in their nature. Okay? So the literature review should provide clear examinations of what is known about the variables from the prior research, including precisely how they have been defined. That's why, sa ating mga teachers, kung mag-download tayo ng isang topic sa Google Scholar, yung sabi ko na bullying, ang daming labas na studies on bullying. But it's your digital literacy as a teacher where to get the information. If you can detect a fake news to what is not fake news, then you go to high quality referencing sections. So try to look at this area and identify. But the first thing you need to do is, should you wish to use a quantitative research design, you must have at least a synthesis paper. A synthesis research paper about quantitative research. Okay? So, kung titanungin nyo saan ba kayo magli-literature review, hindi lang kayo magli-literature review doon sa topics ninyo, mag-literature review din kayo doon sa methods ng research nyo. And that's the beauty of doing research. Okay? Because when you will face your panel and they will question you, they will look at your caliber as the person in authority who did that research. Kahit anong pamamaraan ang tignan nila, alam na alam mo kung saan, ano yung sagot niya. You are always updated of what is new to what is not new about the topic. Okay, so that's also part of a literature review for quantitative research. Next, as to the design and methods of data collection, kung quantitative research tayo, take note that the primary quantitative designs for quantitative research are experimental research and survey research. Let's talk about experimental research first. Experimental research is the oldest form of quantitative research. It has been used by many scientists. It has been used by teachers. It has been used by businessmen, etc., etc. Why? Experiments rely on hypothesis testing. And when you test it, the variable relationship of the variables is that the basic use of experiment is to test how you introduce an intervention affects what happens. Karamihan sa atin mga teachers and doing an experimental research in the classroom is doing an intervention kung experimental. If one is interested to look at the effectiveness of using graphic organizer in the conceptual understanding of the students, if you wish to identify the effectiveness of using YouTube in enhancing the speaking skills of the students, they are all relying on experiments. We are all scientists in our own ways. We are all scientists in our own ways, and in social science, in social research, doing experiments on our part entails an intervention to implement. And in other words, we select research subjects, we do something to observe the effect of that intervention. And in order that we are measuring quantitatively the effect of an intervention or a variable we have introduced, we need to control for other factors. You have already experienced doing an experimental research like yung pinaka-basic, yung pre-test, post-test. But mind you, when you will do when you do a quantitative research and you wish to implement in a way that it's experimental in its nature, you must be able to clear out first the factors and the variables there. That's why it is needed for you to control other factors. Let me move on. First factor you need to look when you implement a quantitative research on experimental research is the natural environment. For example, for sciences, will it be in the laboratory? Will it be in the internet? Or will it be in the natural environment? Or will it be in the classroom? So field experiments occur in natural environments. And what is natural is an attribute of an experimental research. Example, research or scientific laboratories are the most common setting for experiments. But for us teachers, it can be in the classroom or it can be in the virtual classroom, as long as we are confident with the protocols of our research. Although they can be artificial setting, meaning they can exist for the sake of the research, they allow researchers the greatest measure of control. Take note, yung pag-pretest lang natin, pag-post-test natin, measured na yon. But we need to be clear about where will we conduct the research. Because if we are not clear where and when to conduct the research, then it may affect the results of that study. Katulad ngayon, yung mga experimental research in the online learning classroom. Okay, how sure are they that they were able to observe what is natural, to observe what is natural to what is not natural, to what is nature to what is not what is non-nature. Okay, so if you are a researcher, you must always have the greatest measure of control. Finally, experiments may be conducted on the internet, and this setting is appropriate when you are studying people's beliefs and attitudes. And your research purpose and hypothesis will ultimately dictate the setting of your experiment as well as the kind of experimental design you have. Very basic yung mga kwan natin, no, sa experimental research sa education na lang. Where will we implement the research? So you must have that greatest consideration in a way that you have the greatest measure of control as a researcher. Right? I have a student who conducted a study on the use of TikTok, no, on the use of TikTok in the speaking skill, speaking skill of students. But I questioned the research because the way how he implemented that intervention on TikTok is hindi niya na monitor, hindi niya kinonsider yung time. Take note, when you talk of experimental research, you are also dealing with time. Time is measured. I asked him, how many times did you implement it? How many days? And the loophole is that he wasn't able to answer it. So the recommendation is redo the study. So kung researcher ka at talagang nakikita mo yung mga factors na ito, for quantitative research, time is very important. Lalong-lalo na kung experimental yung research mo na yan. Ilang weeks na na-implement ang intervention, ilang araw. Kasi hindi naman pwede na isang araw lang ang pagitan ng pre at post mo. Kasi meron pang natitira doon na ano na yung tawag doon? Remnants nung kwan eh. So dapat you must balance it so that you can measure if the students gained or did not gain something. And I will talk about mamaya yung paggamit ng gain effect at saka effect sizes. A very good way for you to identify if a certain intervention has high, low, or has no effect to the skills of the students. Because there is a free software na pwede nyong gamitin to identify the cohence the effect or the effect size of an intervention. In fact, a very good software is the G-Power. I-download nyo yung G-Power sa internet, libre lang yan. Pwede nyo gamitin yan, pwede nyang i-compute ang effect size ng intervention. Pwede niya kayong turuan kung ilang number of samples ang makukuha nyo doon. Okay, next. So experiments are used in explanatory research and they are based on causal logic. Causal logic because there is a cause and effect logic. This logic looks at identifying the causal relationship of variables. For example, A causes B or A causes B under C circumstance. So depende kasi yan sa uri ng experimental research na gagamitin mo. There are necessary conditions in order to support the presence of a causal relationship. First, you identify the independent variable precedes the dependent variable. Or the independent variable must be related to the dependent variable. And there must be no alternative explanation for the dependent variable or no extraneous variable. Okay? A certain example would tell, my student who conducted a research on the use of mind mapping strategy in enhancing the writing skills of the students. Nagpa-pretest siya, nagpa-essay siya, then pina-implement niya yung, kinuha niyo muna yung attitude ng students on writing, something like that sa pre-test niya. Then, kinondition niya yung mga estudyante, and he get also their pre-test writing performance. Then in-implement niya yung intervention sa loob ng 2 or 3 weeks. Okay, then similar research, similar post-test at saka post-test on the attitude and post-test on the writing performance were implemented. So, sabi ko sa kanya, you should be sure na yung intervention na yan ay may pagkakaiba, at kung walang pagkakaiba, dapat ma-explain mo kung ano yung rason bakit walang pinagkaiba before and after. So this defines already that if the dependent variable precedes the dependent variable, or the independent variable is not related to the dependent variable. So I think that you need also to look if you are a researcher. Okay, and for experimental groups are those that receive the experimental intervention, also called the experimental stimulus. And the control groups did not receive the intervention. In some cases, they may receive a placebo effect. So ito is also a concern that we look upon. No, because there are experimental researches na naging resulta ng output ng students, walang pinagkaiba sa pre-test at post-test. So nagkaroon siya ng intervention, 2 groups pa yung estudyante, pero wala talagang pinagkaiba. So sabi ko, so meaning to say, whether you implemented that intervention or you did not implement that intervention, nothing happened on the competencies, on the speaking skill of these students. Perhaps there's something wrong with the way you did it. You go back and you redo the intervention, you redo the study. Pero when we talk of experimental research, dapat meron briefing at debriefing rin tayo sa mga participants. Dine-debrief rin natin sila at the end of the study. Then a pretest determines a baseline prior to introducing the experimental intervention, and a post-test is given after the experimental intervention to assess the impact of that intervention. So mga teachers, very common sa atin ang experimental research, but I would like to tell you that you must be able to have a science-based protocol to implement an experimental research design, and you must be able to calculate the effect size of this intervention. You go to Cohen's the effect para sabihin niya, the effect of your intervention is high, the effect of your intervention is low, or the effect is there's no effect. So ito yung mga possible na thing na nakikita natin. Pero usually kasi kung wala man lang ka-effect yung mga ginagawa natin, lalo kung sa instruction siya nakatuon, bakit pa tayo mag-research? So kailangan natin bigyan ng no? Lalong-lalo na sa inyo sa DepEd, meron kayo tinatawag na curriculum innovation. And your curriculum innovation must be backed up with research. Lalo kung gagamitin mo yung produkto ng research mo, ginamit mo sa classroom, replicate mo sa ibang schools, sa ibang teachers, dapat confident ka na kapag dinala mo na yung resulta ng research mo, confident ka na may impact, may effect. May effect yung research mo sa competencies ng mga bata. And that to be a succeeding part of your research. And going back again to this experimental research, there's what we call replication. Uulitin din na naman yan. Uulitin na naman yan. Okay? Kasi sa experimental research, the more replications and the same results is yielding, then that means to say there's something good. There's an effect with that kind of research we have. No? Pasensya na kayo, medyo kasi napuyat po kami kagabi. We have our alumni activity last night. Next, I'd like to show to you this pre-experimental research design na pwede niyong i-adapt. Quantitative pa rin po pinag-uusapan natin dito, ha? So, for a pre-experimental research design, meron tayong 3 uri ng research design ang pwede niyong gawin. Kasi under experimental, meron kasi tayong 3 uri na naman. Meron tayong tinatawag na pre-experimental, meron tayong tinatawag na quasi-experimental, at meron tayong tinatawag na true experimental. Now, sa mga pre-experimental research designs, we have this design one-shot case study. Ito yung single case, single lang estudyante mo, at saka one stop lang yung pag-intervention mo. And this is the weakest kind of experimental research design. Yung one-shot case study. Isang grupo ng estudyante, nag-pretest ka, nag-implement ka, then nag-post-test ka. That's one-shot case. So at least we should know that our research design is quantitative, but your specific research design use is one-shot case study. The second one is one group pre-test post-test design. They can be a single class. You did a pre-test, you implement an intervention for 3 weeks, then you did the post-test. That's the pre-test post-test. And of course, we have that static group comparison, wherein you have two groups, section A and section B. One group experimental intervention, both group post tests. So it's up to you as a researcher which to adapt among these designs, but mind you, all of these are quantitative, and you must get an objective data from these designs. Okay? So ito po yung pre-experimental. Ang pre-experimental designs ay ito yung mga research designs na medyo hindi naman masyadong complicated. Pero pag tinatawag kasi natin yung strength ng science, sa mga ito ito yung mga medyo mahina, okay, compared sa other experimental research designs we have. Okay? Next, we have also the true experimental research design. Bakit true? Kasi they're actually made to be they need to be implemented in a matter that there are protocols to be observed. We have number 1, the design on the pre-test, post-test control group design. Dapat ang group ng respondents mo ay 2. And the action you do there is you pre-test the both group, one group only for the experimental intervention, then both groups for the post-test. Then you compare. You compare the results. You compare which the group has the highest, whether the teaching intervention that is traditional or a teaching intervention that is new. So depende yon kung ano yung gagawin mong design. But there are also teaching interventions that is found somewhat equally same with the new and with that old intervention. Kaya ang naging recommendation ng mga faculty researchers dyan, this kind of intervention can be supplemented to that intervention to enhance the competencies of these students, competencies of these teachers, competencies of these people, this group of respondents. The second one is the Solomon 4 group design. From the word Solomon 4 group, dapat 4 groups yung respondents mo, but they were randomly assigned. No? While through experimental, because it entails effort by the teacher. Imagine kung 4 ba naman yung group ng respondents mo, tapos irarandom mo pa sila i-assign, no? Yung kung parang kung teacher 1 ka ngayon, parang gusto mo nang mag-retire kung ganun yung kahirap yung pag-gather mo ng data. Kasi dapat may maximum control ka sa kanila, kasi kung wala, hindi mo rin nila pa makukuha. I-stop mo na yung pag-gather ng ganyan study kapag wala kang control. Kaya nga, research is a scientific process. So your action there is one group pre-test, experimental intervention, then you post-test, then one group pre-test, post-test, one group experimental intervention, then post-test, then one group post-test only. Then you compare. You compare. So kaya siya 4 square. Kasi sa 4 na sides, kailangan mo talagang tignan. Okay? So kaya siguro sabi ko naman I have not seen yet a concrete study na in-implement yung mga ganito in my university and in the region where I I am residing. Because siguro ang number one consideration kasi dyan is entails, resources, money, time. No, yun na lang bang ginagawa mo? No, yun na lang bang ginagawa mo sa loob ng kwan? Eh lalo na kung ganyan ang approach ng thesis mo or dissertation mo, eh medyo matatagalan ka. You expect na medyo matatagalan ka kasi kailangan mo talagang tignan sa apat na area. And of course, the third one is the post-test only control group design. This is what two groups, but they were randomly assigned. Then your action there is one group experimental, then intervention, then post-test, then one group post-test only. Okay, so they are true experimental. True na mahirap. Okay, kaya ata sila naging true experimental designs. Okay, next. The last one is the quasi-experimental designs. Ito naman is kung dedicated kayo to do a research na talagang it will take time. Kasi quasi like this time series experiment, though single group siya, single group talaga yung group ng respondents mo, but your action is measures taken over time. Kaya nga time series. So is it every 3 hours, every 5 hours, every other day? Then experimental intervention, measures taken over. So para makita mo, ang beauty na kasi ng mga ganitong research design is that nakikita mo na kung ano yung pinakamaganda at talagang confident ka sa data mo. I must tell you na it's really hard to follow, but at the end of the day, your research is such a wonderful research because the findings are credible. The findings are credible. The other one is multiple time series experiment wherein two groups naman. No? But same, taken over time. Time series. No? Imagine kung i-measure mo lang yung albawa, yung attitude of the students in using a certain learning intervention. Nako, every 3 hours, balikan mo sila. Every 3 hours, balikan mo. So, measures over a time, tumanda ka na. Okay? The space and time sa physics natin. Take note sa space, yung concept ng space and time natin. Every time na nag-move tayo, tumatanda tayo. So, hindi natin maibabalik yung mga panahon na nawaldas. So, I am not discouraging you to use these kinds of research design, but these are very encouraged to be used because the actual results are very confident. Very confident ka dito sa kanilang mga resulta. And of course, we have the non-equivalent control group. Though non-equivalent control, two groups siya. So, one group pre-test, experimental, then post-test, one group, then pre-test, then post-test only. Okay? So, hindi lang ang gagamitin mo, hindi lang t-test na napandalawahan ang gagamitin mo na dyan. No, gagamit ka na dyan ng ANOVA, gagamit ka na dyan ng mga other higher level of inferential statistics. Okay, so I'm done with the experimental. The next one is the survey research. Survey research as a quantitative research is the most widely used quantitative design. No, kung yung experimental ay oldest, ang survey naman ang pinaka-common, particularly sa social sciences. Common uses of survey with which you are probably familiar include the census, polling on political issues or public opinions, and even market research. Now, there is what we call a cross-sectional design, seeking information from sample at one point in a time. And the other one is longitudinal design, occurring at multiple times in order to measure a change over time. So for a survey research, your research can be cross-sectional or longitudinal. Take note that when we do also a survey research, time is also critical. Time is important. It requires the prudent quality or characteristic of a researcher on how you will wisely utilize your time to gather findings, to gather data in your study. Moving on. For a survey questionnaire, for a survey design with quantitative, survey questionnaire is important. Survey questionnaires are the primary data collection tool in survey research. So a questionnaire is referred to as a survey instrument, and questionnaire construction and delivery to respondents are very involved processes, and I will discuss them in detail afterwards. Ngayon, for quantitative research, yung sabi ka natin kanina, pinaka-widely accepted talaga kasi they have the attribute to be replicated. No? For example, a foreign study conducted on the attitude, beliefs, practices, and you adapted the tool as long as you pilot tested it in your level, in your area, and you use the same survey questionnaire, then you're confident that it's still quantitative in its nature. But I would like to remind you that whenever you get a questionnaire from the internet, a questionnaire from any sources, please message the one who used or who developed the tool. Or better yet, contact him or her so that you are confident that the questionnaire, you are given permission to use the questionnaire. Okay. In survey research, the first phase of coding focuses on the format and content of the survey questions or survey items. Take note that when say quantitative research, alam niyo naman lahat na ito, no? Review na lang. Meron kang survey items questions that measures the attributes or that measures something. You sabi, 5 as the highest and 1 as the lowest. 5 as highly effective, then 1 is not effective. Okay? So you have always a question that measures an attribute. In survey research, it is explicitly thinking about assessment and evaluation as you construct your data collection instrument. No? Bumabalik tayo sa assessment of student learning, that a survey instrument for quantitative research is more on developing a tool that are talking about assessment and evaluation. There are many pre-existing surveys available on a wide range of topics. It is advisable, ito yung suggestion ko, consult published research on your topic available online. So should you wish to have a topic on bullying, topic on digital literacy, ang dami nang na-publish sa internet, ang dami nang na-publish ng mga authors around the world about the topic. And with that, you can even get free research instrument about the topic. Yan ang beauty naman ng quantitative research. Hindi ka mahihirapan na maghanap ng mga research tools na pwede mong gamitin kasi pagkadami-dami naman na. No? Lahat na nga may sa lahat ng aspeto parang na-measure na rin lahat, di ba? So if you are using one or more pre-existing surveys, as part of them, make sure to secure any necessary permission rights and cite your sources appropriately. And survey items, the question in the questionnaire are designed to help you test your hypothesis or answer your research questions. The hypothesis or research questions have been constructed in terms of the variables you want to measure. And usually, these research instruments are seen at the end of the research article. Or kung ang na-download mo ay mga published theses and dissertations coming from the libraries of the online libraries of the different universities in the United States, in Asia, no? Kasi nada-download mo yung buong kwan. They have these universities, they have these repositories of their theses and dissertations. And that is what I am dreaming that we have to accept or to embrace as culture sa ating mga universities. Kasi sometimes ang mga researches kasi natin, mga dissertation natin, mga thesis natin, nag-e-end lang sa shelves. Sinong magbabasa sa kanila? Then they should have a knowledge sharing. policy. No? Kumbaga, ikaw na author, mag-agree ka na yung paper mo ilalagay nila sa online library ng university ninyo, then mailagay siya sa World Wide Web so that others around the world can also read your research, and that is your gateway to becoming an international researcher. Why? You can be an international researcher when you are being cited by foreign authors. And if you are not being cited, you cannot get that claim as an international researcher. In fact, meron na tayong AD indexing rin, which is new now, the Alper-Dogger indexing, that research outputs of a faculty is measured by way to look at the number of citations, and that's actually the impact of an author. No? Ganun din ang titignan natin na ang mga researches natin dapat may impact. Kasi saka lang naman yan magkakaroon ng impact kapag na-implement mo yung actual na intervention at saka siya na-cite. Kung hindi naman siya na-cite, di anong nangyari? Anong impact? That eventually defines soon your contribution to the body of knowledge. That's why if you wish to get mga ready-made na instrument, maghanap kayo yung mga full na online na thesis at dissertation ng mga foreigners. Ang dami-dami. Saka when you download them, nandun na lahat yung mga sample ng kanilang mga ethics clearance, sample ng kanilang mga certificate of plug scan or Turnitin, nandun na rin yung mga sample ng instrument, sample calculation of yung calculation ng kanilang mga data, nandun na. So, knowledge is meant to be shared. Intellectual knowledge. Kaya nga, knowledge, no? Knowledge and technology. Okay? So, should you wish to get good survey references, then good research questionnaire, pwede kayo mag-download. Okay? So, with this, question construction is the heart of a survey research. Take note that the quality of the data you can get in your quantitative research is defined by the quality of the research questions you have. So never lose sight of your goal, which is measuring the phenomenon of interest or problem of inquiry as precisely as possible. Then getting at and what you really want to get at. And the organization of your survey instrument or your questionnaire is critical to your research design. No? Kasi yung iba, as long as ma-define mo at makita mo na yung questionnaire at confident ka na sa uri ng questionnaire na gagamitin mo, from that alone, you can already come up your statement of the problem. Maraming strategies ang mga researchers. Kaya nga sabi na, there are many ways to kill a chicken. So there are many ways to do a research. The goal there is for the questionnaire to be easy for respondents to understand, for you then to later process the data. And the layout should be simple, clear, and uncluttered. So it depends upon you use a rating scale or you use a Likert scale. So for a rating scale like this, how open do you talk to your roommate about personal matters? Very, somewhat, occasional, rarely, never. So pwede siyang rating scale lang. The other one, pwede siyang Likert naman, no? And you convert it into strongly agree, somewhat agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, strongly agree, with 1 as the lowest and 5 as the highest. So take note that before you use a quantitative survey instrument that has been adopted from other countries or from foreign authors, you must have also the initiative as a researcher to have the pilot testing or to have the test of applicability of the research instrument in the context of your respondents. Though marami ring researches na kwan, pero ang tingnan nyo is kung Asia, mag-start na lang kayo sa Asia. No? Bullying, extent of bullying in Asia. Then from that Asia, you identify the studies in Southeast Asia. And from that Southeast Asia, nandyan ang Philippines. So it's up to you on how you will arrange all of this for your research. Next is quantitative survey. I'm so sorry for the spelling. Medyo napuyat po. So for quantitative survey, respondent burden occurs to the degree that the respondents experience their participation is too stressful. Take note, whenever you give the instrument to your respondents later on, they should not be stressed. You must have the face validity of the instrument. You know, ito rin yung isang rason kung bakit hindi mo talaga makuha yung actual na responses ng mga respondents mo. Kasi imagine 10 pages yung research instrument mo, tapos ang font niya 8 ang font niya, tapos ang font style niya Times New Roman, tapos back to back pa. So ang haba-haba. Imagine that, kahit nga i-digitize mo yan eh. Kahit i-Google survey mo yan kung ganon kahaba. Diyos ko, ma-high blood ka naman na sa pag-answer. Imagine imbes na inansweran mo yung instrument niya ng 2 hours ka na nag-answer ng instrument. Imagine the stressful, time-consuming. As far as possible, make your research instrument simple and short. But kung standardize the instrument at talagang ganon, ikaw na researcher, you must have you must be able to reach your audience in a way na hindi sila ma-stress sa pag-answer. That's why on their convenience, at their time that they are available, then you can gather responses. Because even kung lagi na lang nag-answer, ang haba-haba. So imagine the degree of stress you are giving that to your respondents. And I'd like also to tell you na kung mag-gather din naman kayo, dapat meron din naman kayong pakonsuelo sa mga respondents ninyo. No, kung mga bata, o kahit bigyan nyo sila isang ballpen, di ba? Or bigyan mo sila ng mga incentive, because we also incentivize our respondents. Incentivize them. O kung gusto mong bigyan ng pera, di why not? Para naman pampalubag loob. Okay? Kasi anyway, a rule kasi when we do also a research is establishing a rapport, establishing your commitment with your respondents. Imagine I am answering your question. I am putting all my personal information in your instrument. I am even putting my monthly income there. So everything, I'm even putting the kung ano mang pinaglalagay ko na personal data dyan. So of course, your instrument should pass through the data privacy. Kaya meron din kayong informed consent form. So survey delivery is another important decision. What will be the modality of your survey? Will it be in-person surveys? Wherein you go to their place, you go to their areas? No? Thank God sa inyo, panahon ninyo, kasi kung mag-gather kayo ng data ninyo, pwede rin siyang online. Many years back, walang online eh. So, kailangan mo talagang puntahan. So, it could be in-person surveys. You also decide whether you do it online. You use web-based, you use Google Survey, you use SurveyMonkey. You also decide whether it will be mail surveys. Email mo siya or telephone. So these are also ways for you to get the responses of the respondents. And the final issue to consider is creating a respondent inventory, so that in which you keep track of your respondents and reduce the risk of multiple responses from an individual. Each respondent can be assigned to a number for anonymity. So let's try to observe this in our quantitative research. Moving on, it's actually 6:47. Hindi pa ako nakahati sa slides ko. Another consideration for quantitative research is the population sampling and the subjects. In which population are you interested in learning? How will you access the members of the population? For quantitative research, you must have a very definite answer. How will you access the respondents? Because their access to the respondents depends upon the timely completion of your output. So who will be your subject or respondents? What size sample will you draw? How will your sampling strategies maximize the reliability and the generalizability of your findings? The quantitative research typically relies on probability sampling, and in probability theory, it involves the use of a strategy in which samples are selected in a way that every person. Kaya yung kwan natin kasi ng probability sampling is that in the population has none and non-zero chance of being selected. All of your respondents have the equal chance to be selected. And that defines the science of sampling. No? So depende kung anong sampling technique ang gagamitin mo na. Now, first, define what is sample size. So from the population of your study, so if your population are teachers, then what will be the sampling size of your teachers? In this specific schools, or in the schools where there are non-performing or there are non-readers, or schools where there are high rate of malnutrition. So ano yung mga sampling kwan mo doon? So to determine the size of sample, how large the sample needs to be depends on your design and extent to which you want to generalize your findings. Once a study population is in place and you've selected a sampling strategy, there are computer programs you can use to determine your samples. One is the use of RAWSOF. The RAWSOF is a sampling size calculator that is very well accepted. Actually, ang ganda niyang gamitin kasi you already defined the margin of error as 5%. You just put what confidence level do you need, 95. For example, you have the population size of 2,000 and the response distribution of 50%. So ang binibigay ng RAWSOF na computation ng samples ay 377 lang. So hindi mo na kailangan ang gagamit ng Slobin because in sampling size issue, no, they have an article on the misuse of Slobin formula. Baka may gumagamit pa tayo ng Slobin. Hindi naman sa hindi na siya pwedeng gamitin, pero there are limitations in the Slobin. And I want you to download the paper written by UP students on the misuse of Slobin's formula so that you can read when and how to use Slobins. Because there are limitations in using Slobins. So it's available online. So a sample issue there is computation of sampling size in Slobin formula. Slobin has limitation. And another way around for you to have better calculation of the sample size is using statistic power analysis software or GPower. And using also a computation of sampling size using online calculators. So ito yung mga makabago ngayon. Sorry. So when you look at the population, then you identify the number, then you get, for example, 377 respondents from 2,000. What does it mean? For quantitative research, you need not to survey the whole 2,000 population, but it tells you that you can only have 377 number of respondents from the 2,000. And they are already sufficient enough to justify that you will generalize later on in your findings that male are more on Marites than female. Male or female are more on becoming Marites than male. So how do we generalize? So the number of samples is important. Okay? So other techniques is your simple random sampling, or we call it as SRS, the systematic sampling. the cluster sampling and the characteristics or in yung tinatawag natin stratified sampling. Padaanan ko na yan para ipakita ko sa inyo ito. So tingnan natin yung dalawang types of random sampling we have. We have the lottery method. Bunutin mo, lagay mo lahat sa baso, then bunutin mo sa lottery method. The other one is using the table of random numbers. You can only use the table of random numbers kung ikaw na researcher medyo masinop-sinop at medyo medyo masipag-sipag kasi meron kang reference. So this is the table of random numbers. Kung ano yung susunod na number, then yun yung ipipick mo ulit. Okay, the other one is systematic sampling. Okay, take note of this. Now let's start with that non-random probability sampling like systematic sampling technique we have. In a method involves selecting the KTH element of the population. The first sample is chosen at the random and the rest is obtained by selecting every KTH item. Example of systematic random sampling of 10 households from the list of 40 households. Take note, you can only have this good sampling technique if you have the actual list of the population. Pag wala kayong actual list ng population, hindi pwede. Dapat meron kang list of that population. Kasi from that population, kukuha ka doon ng samples mo. So sabi natin kanina, doon sa 2,000, 377 lang ang kukunin mo. Dito ang example natin, 10 households ang kukunin mo sa 40 na households. That systematic sampling technique is done with this. First, you calculate the sampling interval with that formula K is equal to N over N. Then divide the total number of households in the population, 40, by the number you want in the sample. In this case, K is equals to 4. And from that 4, select a random number. A number between 1 and the sampling interval. From the random number table or using draw lots, let us say 1 to 4, 3 ang pinili mo, 3 is the first household, then count down the list starting with household number 3, then select the fourth household. So for example, the second selected household is 3 plus 4 is equal, or number 7. Note that when you reach the end of the list, you should have selected your desired number of households. So the selected household is 3, 7, 11, 15, 19, 23, 27, 31, 35, 39. Alam nyo na ito? Kasi lesson rin ito ng mga senior high school. No? If you have not, you have counted wrong or miscalculated the sampling interval and you should go back. Okay, so example of this is that for kanina, now this is the 40, yung 40, then ang napili niyang random respondents ay, kasi for yung K kanina, mamili ka sa 1 to 4, 3 ang pinili niya, so nag-start siya sa 3, 1, 2, 3, that's Domingo, then another count, 1, 2, then 1, 2, 3, 4. No, we have at Manalo, then Pineda, then Salazar, then Espirito, then Valencia, Fajardo, then so on and so forth. Okay? So, ito na yung number of household respondents mo. So, 4 yung K niya kanina. So, 3 yung pinili kung saan siya nag-start. So, nag-count siya from 3. Then, nag-count siya, nag-skip 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kaya lumabas yung mga sunod-sunod. So, sa 40 na respondents, yung 10 ang nakuha mo. Okay, next. Medyo 6:56 na. Okay. A researcher would like to know the reason of students' high depression level. From the record of the guidance office, there are 62 students with depression. If the study needs 12 participants, who are they? N is equal to 62. N is 12. Ang K niya is 5. Ang random start number niya is 2. So, it starts with respondents number 2, then nag-count siya ng 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, it follows with Atienza, Chavez, De Vera, Esguerra, Gonzaga. So, kaya nandito yung mga selected samples niya. Imagine if you have 2,000 respondents at ganyan ang gawin mo, manu-manuhin mo. No? So, The beauty there is it's laborious, but at the end of the day, you are confident that the research has been conducted in a way that is scientific. Kaya siya research. The other one is stratified sampling technique. No? The population is divided into strata according to predefined characteristics. Example, you work for a company of 5,000 people and you want to find out how they are saving for retirement. Use strat random sampling to obtain your sample. Okay. So first, decide how you want to stratify the population. For example, sa age nila, no, you have then as you identify to stratify, you make a table representing your strata. For example, age ang basis mo 20 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 to 59, 60 plus. Then follow table shows age groups, how many people in the population are in that strata. So there are 800 in 20 to 29 age brackets. After that, use the stratified formula. Sample size of the strata is equal to the layer size or overpopulation times entire sample size. So to calculate the proportion of the people from each group, this is actually the age, the number of people in the strata, the number of people in the sample. So ang nakuha niyang sample is 200 lahat. So 32 sa 29 to 29, 44 sa 39, 48 dito, 40 diyan, 36 diyan, a total of 200. Then perform a random sampling. Okay? So that's actually the way how will you do it. The other one is cluster sampling or area sampling. No, the sample units are selected from the area where heterogeneity among elements is already considered. The samples taken are representatives of the population. The method is more cost effective. So stratified sampling to cluster sampling. Moving on. So this is the illustration, the population of that cluster sampling. The other one is the multi-stage sampling. So ito naman yung mga ginagamit ng mga UP sa isang project na meron kami, multi-stage sampling. Talagang matrabaho siya kasi from the ang ginawa, from that 600 households na kukunin mo, buong Pilipinas yan, ika-categorize mo sila sa probinsya. Pag nakuha mo sa probinsya, bababa ka na naman sa municipal. Kapag 7 ang nakuha mo sa munisipyo, kukuha ka na naman ng 6 na barangay. Sa 6 na barangay, tagta-3 households. No? Sa 3 households, ilang tao. So talagang multi-stage yung process. So this one, 6 provinces hanggang you route it to 4 municipalities, from 4 municipalities to 5 barangays, from 5 barangays to 5 households. Pero alam niyo ba sa 5 barangays, may zone area pa yan. So sa 5 barangay, anong zone area ka pupunta? So medyo talagang matrabaho. Kaya if you need research funding, mag-propose kayo sa mga funding agencies. Lalo na kung quantitative ang research nyo, gustong-gusto yan ng Philippine Statistics Authority, gustong-gusto yan ng Commission on Population, kasi they would like to get actual data. Then the other one are non-probability sampling like purposive sampling, no? Purposive sampling, quota sampling, and convenience sampling. Okay? Okay, why purposive? When you put purposive as your sampling, you must have a selection criteria. Ano yung criteria mo? Bakit siya? Okay, yun doon na iba ang purposive sa convenience. Ang convenience kasi kung sinong pinaka-easy access sa kanila, sila na. Pero ang purposive, dapat may criteria ka. So kung senior citizen siya, dapat ilang years na siyang nag-stay sa barangay. O mga ganun na criteria. Okay? So kaya siya purposive. A purpose must have criteria. Then of course, yung quota sampling naman is determined based on the judgment of the researcher. Kung ilan ang kukunin mo. Okay, next. So take note of the errors also in doing a survey. Coverage error is a concern for quantitative research when listing of the subjects' population is inadequate, such that a group is unintentionally excluded in the selection of samples. Therefore, it is bias. Okay, so coverage error siya. The other one is non-response error. No, kung nag-survey ka na at hindi naman siya nag-respond, so you failed to get the response of the survey. So you also try to consider all of this. Third one is the sampling error, yung pinag-usapan natin kanina. When the information between the population and the sample, it occurs when samples are not properly selected. Take note ha, kung may sampling error ang quantitative research mo, nag-generalize ka doon, mali yung resulta ng study. Mali siya. Kung hindi mo kayang mag-sample at kayang-kaya mo naman na i-total enumeration sila, i-total enumeration mo na lang. Kung kaya mo naman at ma-access mo naman sila. Kasi when the when the respondents are totally enumerated, mas maganda. Bakit nga ba tayo nagsasample? Ang reason kasi ng sampling is to lessen the time. To lessen the time. So, kung kaya mo naman kunin silang lahat, then why not? And of course, the error on measurement when the instrument being used to elicit information is not properly worded, such as ambiguous or misleading questions. So, my listening participants, these are the types of survey errors that we also address for quantitative research. Okay? So, moving on, in experimental research, there are instances when purposeful sampling is used. For example, convenience sampling involves identifying research subjects based on their accessibility to the researcher, and this approach is often used when the researcher has access to subject with a particular institution, organization, business, or group. While quasi-experimental design typically use this kind of sampling procedure. So your quasi-experimental is mainly a matter also of using a convenience sampling. Next, moving on, malapit na tayong matapos. Data analysis and assessment, you know naman that for quantitative, you are using the common analysis and interpretation like frequency on descriptive statistics, measures of central tendency, the mean, median, and mode, and measures of dispersion or the standard deviation. So for inferential statistics tests, we also look at the hypothesis of your question. Kaya lumalabas dito yung tinatawag natin na is there a significant difference, no significant difference, kasi inferential siya. One common approach to inferential statistics is the use of NHST, which stands for Null Hypothesis Significance Testing. Kaya kung quantitative yung research nyo, kailangan lang talaga kung nasa inferential na kayo, yung mga sa dulo-dulong statement of the problem, is there a significance, there is no significance, mga ganun-ganun ang nandoon. So your null hypothesis significance testing or statistical significance tests are used to determine the null hypothesis, which states that there is no relationship between or among the variables. A type 1 error occurs when you infer that a relationship exists that does not exist. Significance testing result is p-value. That's why you have your p-value coming from your Pearson R, or coming from your test of differences. You are also looking for a p-score of less than 0.05, yung tinatawag natin na 0.05. No, reject or accept the null hypothesis, which is expressed as follows. No? If your p-score is higher than 0.5, you should not infer relationship between the variables. So take note of this, that when the computed p-value is lesser than 0.05, then accept it. But if when it's higher than 0.05, then a portion on your part wherein you can reject or accept hypothesis. That's why hypothesis testing for inferential statistics. Next, So I have here with you an overview of inferential statistics test na pwede nyong gamitin. T-test for comparison, you compare two groups. ANOVA for comparison, 3 groups. ANCOVA, more than 2 groups. Chi-square, association. Kramer's B, association. Pearson product, correlation. Multiple R regression, correlation. Please read the overview. Next. Do not forget that in a research, you have validity and reliability issues. So the main criteria for evaluating quantitative research are the validity and reliability. Your validity refers to the extent which measure is actually topping what you think is topping. It measures what it intends to measure, that's validity. While reliability refers to the consistency of the results. So should we wish to measure the attitude of the students on speaking, listening, reading, the validity of the research is very important. Are the instruments measuring really the attributes or not? So for reliability, you use also the instrument that is valid and reliable. Now, the results of your research are dependable. Kasi imagine, i-propose ni Sir Joven ang kanyang research ang findings ng kanyang research sa kanilang LGU. Syempre, kung gustong ipaulit, ganun ang lalabas, then the research is reliable. But take note, quantitative research should be accepted as policy enhancement factor. No? Dapat may impact. Yan ang impact ng research natin. No? Kaya mamaya kung nagkamali tayo, karon tayo ng type 1, type 2 errors, no? Instead na payamanin natin yung mga farmers natin, based sa research natin, sinabi natin na yun ang resulta, yun pala ginamit naman yung pesticide na yun pala ang nagpahirap sa kanila. So we look at the social responsibility of everyone. The social acceptability, the viability, and of course, our responsibility as a researcher. Okay? So you know what's all about the validity, phase validity of that research, instrument, content validity, the construct validity, statistical validity, ecological validity, internal and external validity. So a way for us as researchers to do quantitative research, we need to look at these validities of this research so that our research will become a contribution to the body of knowledge, contribution to human development. Kasi we see research as a contribution to human development. Of course, the reliability on interim, test, retest, and inter-rater. So after analyzing your data, later on you are now interpreting the results. Okay, so what will you do when you are interpreting the results of your study and present the results? You are using tables. Tables are good for presenting the data or number of variables that can be used for inferential or descriptive. Others are also using histograms to present distributions for a single variable. And if you are interested to present the graph or the scatter plots of the relationship of the variables, pwede kayong gagamit ng scatter plots to see the relationship on the different variables you have in your study. No? Illustrate the relationship between two continuous variables, help you see whether the relationship is linear, the direction is upward, left to right, so there's a direct relationship, or negative relationship kung Pearson yung na-compute nyo, or the strength of the relationship, or the outlying points, or if you have an intervening moderating variables. And of course, bar and line graphs for illustrating one or more categorical variables that are independent and one continuous variable that is the dependent. So take note, for a quantitative research, you also look at the time of implementation. After looking at the instrument you have, after looking at the statistics you have to be used in your research, then you come up with your timeline of implementation. In your timeline implementation, you program it if that study will be implemented within 3 months, 5 months, or 6 months. so that you can finish the study guided with time element. Okay po? Then, of course, sa lahat naman ng projects, kahit quantitative yan, kung mag-implement ka, may budget. Kung personally funded yung research niyo, galing sa sarili nyong bulsa, okay lang din. Pero pag externally funded, may funding coming from other agencies, then that's good. But if you wish to submit a proposal sa birth ninyo, sa institution ninyo, talaga titignan yung proposed budget. No? Pero take note that a good research has also a good budget. Kasi kung 1.5 lang yung budget sa research ninyo, anong arod yung gagawin ng 1.5? Okay, so gayon din. So the cost is the quality. Take note, research is also quality, has the quality if you have also the resources to use in your research. And that's actually a part of your research management. Okay, so the outline of your quantitative research design, isipin na ninyo yung topic ninyo, the theoretical perspective, what are the purpose of your research, what are the questions and the hypotheses, your literature review, what will be your design, is it experimental, through experimental or survey, who are the population and sampling in the subjects, the data analysis and assessment, the interpretation and representation, the ethics, and the references. So in summary, as reviewed, this quantitative research is useful to learn variables that has relationship. And it's through quantitative research you can allow to build description of statistics on the phenomena, refute or support existing theories, and test hypotheses about variable relationship, and approach values, breadth, control, and precise measurement. Large or randomly selected samples are generally favored. And of course, I'd like to present to you some concerns we have. There are also trends in statistics now in which I cannot disclose the details of this statistical, but to give you an overview na para naman later on baka pwede nyong magamit kasi ang trend kasi ng statistics sa ating bansa compared sa other countries, ang Pilipinas medyo nahuhuli po tayo sa statistics. Halimbawa, gumagamit na ang ibang bansa ng mga matataas na uri ng statistics, sa graduate school natin ginagamit pa rin natin ang Pearson R. So a way for us to put something new, there are suggestions here, actually these are new things now sa atin, bago-bago pa lang sa atin kasi ang konsepto na ito, pero sa ibang bansa napaka basic na ito sa kanila. They cover the use of structural equation modeling and path analysis. Hindi pa lahat ng mga researchers natin ay gumagamit ng statistical models na mga ito. Ito kasi ay mga quantitative tools and statistics for research that are very important to give model. They can model certain aspect of phenomenon, aspect of events. So covariance, variance-based, multiple group, mediation, moderation analysis. So hopefully, we can all become experts in using this SEM or structural equation modeling. So there are also implications and suggestions here that content validity indices such as item validity index, subscale validity index, and scale validity index not discussed in master's and PhD classes. So therefore, content validity and all of these indices are easily computed using Excel. Literature of content is very rich. You also get the literature from Pollitt and Beck in 2006, like this. Content validity index. Another concern, factor analysis can be used to assess contract validity, convergent or discriminant. However, not being discussed in master's and PhD classes. So ito lang naman is simple observation and suggestion. I'm not claiming na pero it's just observation and suggestion. So a research instrument has good convergent validity if the question statements associated with latent variables understood by the respondents in the same way as they were intended by the designers of the question statement. That's according to CAC 2019. Next. A good measurement instrument has good discriminant validity. So factor analysis can be carried out using PSI Mago or SPSS software. Baka yung SPSS natin medyo luma na, so kailangan nating bumili. Okay, a support for better quantitative research in our schools. Or WARP PLS is a friendly software. It cannot perform the traditional exploratory factor analysis or EFA and CFA. If properly written, a survey questionnaire developed using EFA or CFA can be easily published in Scopus and ISI index journals. Implication to impact of your research. Kung ang quantitative research natin ginamitan ng mga ganitong tools of statistics, the higher chances of being published. Okay? Like what the Dr. Lyndon Ocampo, a Philippine scientist, is doing in his researches. So, ang ginagamit niyang mga tools sa kanyang researches ay yung mga higher level of statistical modeling. That's why he is one of the most powerful scientists in Asia. Of course, your use of Slovene, please read on the use of Slovene's formula. Para if we understand the misuse, then huwag nating ipagamit. Gamit na tayo ng bago. So implications for quantitative research. Of course, we have this software, we call it as statistical power analysis. It can give you good statistical tests. Pwede niyang i-compute ang sample size, effect size, and even tolerable errors in type 1 and type 2 errors and complexity of statistical tests. So pwede niyong i-download yan free from the internet at aralin ninyo. Okay, so meron din tayong G-Power, SAS, PASS, or IBM. Okay, ito ha. Descriptive statistics covered in K-12 curriculum, discussed again in undergrad, master's, and doctorate. Considering reviewing siguro, no, syllabus, inclusion of new stat models is needed. O may sabi dito, why descriptive statistics are still being used in this doctorate level? So kaya siya, sabi nila, doctorate level na kayo, hindi niya dapat descriptive research ang gagamitin ninyo, dapat yung higher level na. Because you are already coming up with your own theory, model of knowledge. So, kung modeling, so hindi mo na gagamitin ng descriptive. O ito, sang TTES at ANOVA are covered in K-12 curriculum, discussed again in the master's, undergrad, and doctorate. Okay, so why descriptive is taught in doctorate level? Something like that. Of course, consider to include non-parametric tests, no, in the graduate school like Matt Whitney, Cruz-Calwalis, Vijan test, because some of these are not discussed in graduate school. Again, Pearson, Spearman, Chi-Spear are discussed in grad school. Okay, they are simple statistical tools. This I got these slides from a statistician, Dr. Amora. Why discuss again in PhD level? Okay, so odd ratio, phi coefficient, Kramer's B coefficient are not discussed in grad school, and linear regression are only discussed in the doctorate level, only few discussion in the master level. So hope for our quantitative research and statistics, they need to go together. Okay, ito. Other regression types like logistic, Poisson ordinal are not discussed in most graduate school, but analysis and structural equation modeling are not discussed in grad school. Take note that path analysis is developed in 1918. It is already 101 years ago in other countries, and in the Philippines, hindi pa tayo masyadong gumagamit nito. SEM developed 50 years back, no, in 1969. So what are the trends now for statistics and quantitative research is that the use of IBM, SPSS, AMOS to carry covariance, path analysis, and SEM. And because the use of this modeling statistical tools are for theory building and theory testing type of research. Okay, so therefore, other implication is that statistics is in most undergrad and grad school are using manual computation. The trend for quantitative research now is we have already tools to be used for statistical computation. Okay? So, meron din tayong example dito. In this school, students are trained to perform data analysis manually with small samples. And the consequence is, after graduation, when students are employed, they will handle real projects with large number of sample sizes. So, kaya sometimes there's a gap between what is existing to what are we teaching. And of course, the masters and PhD students pass compre exam in research in stat. After the compre exam, the student hired a statistician for his or her thesis and dissertation. What happened? So expectation that when you have your masters and PhDs, you are already good for research and statistics, or a good way, or an assistance or minimal assistance from statisticians. Pwede rin naman. Okay? So, thank you very much. I exceeded 24 minutes. Maraming salamat at hoping we learned something tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gilbert. A very extraordinary, fruitful, and meaningful discussion this evening about quantitative research, its design, and implementation. So for the information of everybody, we will cater to ask many questions as possible, depending on the availability of our time. It's already 7:24. We will select questions raised by our participants here in Zoom. And to those who will be able to tap to ask questions, I would like you to introduce yourself first, the institutions where you are affiliated with, and your question. To those who would like to remain anonymous, you may forward your questions to slido.com. Just follow the link. So, Sir Gilbert, we have here our question in our chat box from Sir Ferdinand from Batangas State University. Is it safe to say that data gathered in survey under QR are not falsifiable? What if G-forms is used in the gathering of data?
I am not saying that QR are falsifiable. Actually, the use of QR in gathering or the use of online or G-forms are encouraged in doing quantitative research. But the thing here is the assurance, the quality assurance that those who answered the questionnaire, sila nga ba yung talagang respondents mo? It's a matter of conveying to your respondents that they should answer honestly and truthfully in your survey instrument. Okay po ang paggamit ng mga online tools ngayon, but there should be a protocol in our level as researchers to identify, to have a quality control in data gathering. Yun lang po, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Another question, sir, from Jonathan Palitayan. What is the minimum number of respondents in a quantitative research?
Okay, sir. In the literature that I have read, for a certain test of relationship, you must have at least more than 30 respondents. That is
Okay.
for inferential statistics. But for descriptive statistics, it depends upon the number of statements, or depend on the depth, the level of data, of quantitative data you are getting from the respondents. Pero pag talagang inferential, kailangan talagang more than 30 sila. Hindi pwedeng 10 i-test mo yung kanyang test of relationship, hindi po pwede yon. Unless I will require you to shift to qualitative research. Thank you very much, sir, for the question.
Okay. Sir, number 3 question from Sir Juanito. Sir Juanito, any suggestions on what quantitative test can be used in action research, especially on interventions?
Sir, for the most common statistical tool for quantitative research and research design is that yung simple pre-test post-test natin, yung mga nasa pre-experimental research designs po natin. So usually kapag pre-test post-test naman po kasi ang ginagamit nyo, i-test lang po yung ginagamit ninyo. Pero pag lagyan nyo siya ng higher level and you wish to have a relationship among the variables, pwede nyo gamitan ng Pearson or test or Spearman-Rowe. Pero pag ang research nyo po ay talagang pre-test, post-test po siya, at saka you wish to have a better quality of that pre-test, post-test, you also compute the gain effects of the intervention, which is you will be using the Cohen's effect calculation para masabi niya na may effect or walang effect yung intervention ninyo. Thank you po.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Sir, last question. I think this is the last question. Is it possible to have a soft copy of the discussion, sir?
Of course, I will be sending the soft copy of my lecture to the organizer po. Sila na lang po ang magbigay sa inyo. Maraming salamat.
Okay. This is a positive feedback, sir. Thank you so much to the organizer and to the brilliant speaker. A one semester topic is comprehensively discussed in 2 hours. Kudos daw, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you po.
I think this is the pahabol question po, sir. Is the result political survey 10 days before elections comparable with the actual results of election?
Okay, medyo na po. Sige po. As long as the election day po ay hindi pa na-declare naman kung sino yung nanalo, pwede pa rin po kayong mag-political survey. Saka kung gusto niyo po ng talagang you need really to set a time to get survey. Kung gusto niyo makatotohanan yung kukunin niyo. For example, yung ginagawa po nila is there should be a representation from the provinces where there are rich voters. Yung marami sila, may representation ka dapat sa mga probinsya na talagang marami silang boto. May representation ka rin sa mga probinsya na konti lang yung boto para well represented yung mo para maging valid later on po yung makikita mo na mananalo. Sa ngayon nakikita ko rin, ginagawa na rin po nilang survey kung siya ang gusto mong president, you type like, love, mga ganun po yung mga smiley, mga ganun na linalagay. Nakikita nyo naman po kung sino yung mga sino yung mga leading doon. Pero po, when sa Facebook po kasi, dapat alam po natin na there are also politicians who have this may capacity sila to manipulate the information in Facebook. Yung marami silang mga binabayaran na taga-pindot, mga ganon, para sabihin na siya na yung leading, mga ganon. So for independent body who are doing a survey for this presidential candidate, there must be a very good scientific protocol for you to follow para lalabas yung actual na resulta. Thank you, Sir Ferdy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Magulod. Last question na lang po, sir. Last na lang po talaga. Can we mix two quantitative methodology, say experimental and correlational in research? Thanks. From West Visayas State University.
Methods? Yes, sir. You can mix both. You can mix the two. For example, doon sa experimental mo, quantitative in nature na yon kasi ginamitan mo na siya ng inferential at gusto mo na namang i-correlate yung kanilang, halimbawa, gusto mong i-correlate yung other factors like the age of the respondents, marahil yung kanilang family status, mga ganon, to their attitude in learning math. With the use of that intervention, pwede po yan. Pero ang sasuggest ko na po yan, kung may correlational, gamitan nyo na po ng higher level ng statistics para hindi na kayo mahirapan. Diyan na po lalabas yung mga statistical modeling and other areas na talagang makukuha mo talaga yung actual, yung pinaka makatotohanang resulta ng research. Opo, pwede po yan.
Thank you so much. And I think that's ends of our question and answer portion. We will try to reply to some of your queries raised after the end of this session. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Gilbert C. Magulod Jr., for your passion and dedication and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. Always remember, my dear participants, stories give life to data and data gives authority to stories. And of course, question instruction is at the heart of survey research. Never lose sight of your goal, which is measuring the phenomenon of interest as precisely as possible. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Magulod. So at this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, let us give the certificate of recognition to our speaker. The certificate reads, Center for Scholarly Researches of Educators in the Philippines Incorporated awards the certificate of recognition to Gilbert C. Magulod Jr., PhD, for imparting his invaluable time, resources, and expertise as resource speaker on the topic Quantitative Research, its design and implementation during the conduct of National Virtual Conference, accorded this 23rd day of April 2022 via Zoom video conferencing. Signed, Ricky A. Kibinko, MAC MLPT, Virtual Conference Director. Signed, OIC National President, CeSREP Incorporated, John Lawrence D. Camacho, MAED LPT. Once again, congratulations, Dr. Gilbert Magulod Jr.
Thank you very much.
At this juncture, before we finally close our program, let me read to you some announcements. To earn a certificate of participation, you must sign up for the evaluation or attendance form that is posted here in Zoom. The certificate of participation will be sent to your respective email right after this event upon verification of your attendance. Paid participants who didn't receive their certificate of participation within a day, please email to CeSREP2019@gmail.com, or you may personally message us on our mobile numbers 0909-8123190 or 0916-216-5221. To our participants who applied for membership, the amount of 180 pesos will be added for LBC delivery in case the applicant wishes to get the original documents. Membership for at least 3 organizations is free or LBC delivery charge. We will follow the mailing address stated in your registration form, or you can email us for your preferred mailing address. We are also encouraging our participants to attend other virtual events sponsored by our affiliated organizations on April 30, 2022, from 1 o'clock in the afternoon to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the Industry 4.0 Comprehensive Organization of Revitalized Educators Incorporated will have national webinar on Industry 4.0 research and education. We will have Dr. Naomi Cosette R. Luis, chemical engineer and supervising research specialist of Department of Science and Technology 6, and Mr. Raul Ray Mark and Salsag, a book author and curriculum and education consultant. Kindly check at our official social media page and channel for details. See you at the next gathering sponsored by CeSREP and all other affiliated professional organizations. My dear colleagues, after the webinar, kindly answer the online feedback form. Please know that your feedback to this academic endeavor is very important to the organizations, so we may be able to deliver quality instruction for the next webinar. At this point, we will now have a post-session photo opportunity. Everyone is requested to turn on and face their device camera. Smile because we just had a successful and productive evening session.
Okay, everyone.
We have 5 panels, sir. Technical.
Yes, from panel 1, smile. Panel 2, smile. Panel 3, smile. Okay. Thank you.
As we end this worldwide academic discussion, allow me to express my gratitude on behalf of the Center for Scholarly Researches of Educators in the Philippines Incorporated, or CeSREP, to the following valued individuals whose unending support and expertise have made this learning endeavor in trying time very possible and successful. Our heartfelt appreciation to Dr. Gilbert C. Magulod Jr., University Director for Technology and Knowledge Management, Cagayan State University. Mr. John Lawrence D. Camacho, OIC National President, CeSREP Incorporated. To our virtual conference director, Mr. K.A. Kibinko. To Bukso, NEMSU San Miguel, PICE, CeSREP, NUUST, General Santos City, WVSU, ISET University, Division of La Union, Pagadian City, Benguet State University, Batangas State University, and CS University. And of course, the working committees, especially the technical team, and to those people who share their precious moment and time to make this webinar possible. This has been your moderator, Joven C. Agunda, signing off. Once again, good evening.